All right. I want to welcome all of you. As you heard from Sayedna, the idea of the department is to somehow try to integrate and manage this process of being very Orthodox and very American, to use his words. The issue that we're going to talk about a little bit is sort of the issue all of us think about down the road, which is how do we raise kids? And really the ultimate objective is how do we keep them in the church? How do we keep them in the faith? How do we keep them to be a part of our heritage as Copts? And the question we have to ask ourselves sort of before we begin any real analysis of this issue is, what do you actually want for your kids? And you have to ask yourself this question and answer honestly. Is it, I want my kids to stay off drugs. I don't want them to marry the wrong person. I don't want to get them involved in the wrong crowd. I want a successful career. I want a doctor. I want a kid with a Tesla, the nice Tesla, right? So what do I really want as a parent? And you have to ask yourself, and you have to be honest with this question, right? Because if I'm bringing them to church because I want them to be good kids, right? And I want them, that's a different objective with a different, process. And the question is this the right motivation for the spiritual life? And when I ask why do we want to bring them to church? Well, I mean, if I think about it, really, I want to have this relationship with them that continues into heaven. I want to see my kids in heaven. I want to be there with them in heaven. So the relationship I start here on earth ends there. And I want to continue that, right? And I want us to always have that focus, that very long-term vision, right? You always have to play the long game as a parent, right? It's about the relationship and the relationship lasting. Not about now, not about this month, this year, this decade, right? But when they're 20 and they're 30 and they're 40, and then into eternity. So when we keep this perspective as parents, it sort of changes how we act as parents, right? When we have that vision. And so how do we do this? This is sort of the rest of the talk, okay? And my goal is never to get invited back to give a talk at this thing, because the real point I'm going to make here is not about the kids, it's you. And so I'm going to kind of go after the parents just a little bit here. So you're all going to forgive me for doing that. So before we begin, let's just kind of talk about Sunday school, since Sunday school is supposed to do this, right? To make our kids into good kids and to make them holy and religious and all the things. I want to just kind of point out the history of Sunday school, right? Sunday school was introduced in a period in the Coptic church of real ignorance, right? The church was kind of backwards. Clergy didn't give sermons. Clergy didn't know anything really about the church. You kind of inherited being a priest from your dad, right? And so, and the clergy didn't know much and nothing was being taught, right? So, Pope Shenouda, Nazir Gayed, Habib Girgis, some of these guys, they went and they got curriculum from all over the world or from outside, and they brought it into Egypt. And the idea was to disseminate information about the church to people, okay? So it's about information dissemination. And it's not very good, right? You have a book, like one copy of the life of St. Anthony in Egypt, and you bring it in, and then we go to this central location, we read the book as servants, we write down in our little kashkush, right, our little notebook, and then we go to different places and we give this talk. It's simply trying to take the information from the book and deliver it, okay? That's Sunday school. Well, we have like the internet now, right? We have Google. We have so many books on PDF. I mean, the number of SoundCloud sermons, hundreds of thousands of hours of SoundCloud, right? Sermons. Everything you can imagine is out there. So we no longer need this in that same way. What are the issues now that we're dealing with? Okay, and so Sunday school doesn't produce what we think it produces, right? It doesn't raise our kids. It doesn't teach them much. You get in there, it's half an hour, you're trying to spend most of the time trying to calm the kids down anyway and telling them, be quiet, stop talking, don't touch him, don't sit next to her, right? And so don't as a parent rely on Sunday school, right? Don't even consider that as part of it. It's on you, It's completely on you. And when I say on you, I want to be very careful in what I mean by that, because I don't mean on you like I brought him to church, I brought him to hymn class, I made him go to the retreat, I did everything. No. That's easy, right? You can throw water on the kid in the morning and you can get him to church early, right? You can just hit him and get him to any meeting you want, right? So it's easy to do the things. When I say it's on you, I mean it's on you and your own personal spiritual life. They see you, they learn from you, right? So they're not going to learn from Sunday school. And if you think just bringing them to all the things is going to fix it, it's not. So it doesn't raise spiritual children, you do. And it may not be very effective, right? Especially when you think about middle school and high school. At this point, do kids really need information dissemination? I mean, what are the issues now? It isn't a lack of knowledge. We have knowledge everywhere, right? There are books everywhere. What we need now, right? We have depression, we have anxiety, we have loneliness, right? This is what the kids are dealing with now. And as parents and as Sunday school, we have to pivot towards that need. We can't be using the weapons of the 1950s and the 1960s to fight today's battle. Right? So as parents, you have to kind of compensate for what your kids are going through, what they're dealing with in today's society, and address those issues, as opposed to like, well, I know if we did, when I grew up, we did these things, right? This is what I did. And so I have to do the same, right? And of course, as parents, we're all hardwired to sort of do the same. That's just our nature to do what our parents did. But we have to also be mindful that we are in a different time and that we have to adapt slowly, right? Adapt as quickly as we can. And the world has never changed as quickly as it does now, right? So our parents also adapted from their parents, but the rate at which things changed was just much slower then, right? So you could get away with doing what your parents did and nobody batted an eyelash because the world didn't change. And now the world just changes too quickly for that approach, right? So as parents, we have to be constantly vigilant of what's going on. And on the resource table, there's some different books and some websites that I highly recommend that some of you go to. And what it does is, what's one you sent me, Abuna? Sorry, yeah, the Culture Translator. And I highly recommend you guys Google Culture Translator. Right? It's one of these blasts that comes out in email every week, and it tells you what's happening with your kids. It's Christian, and it tells you what the new TikTok videos are, what the new words are, what everyone is talking about out there, so that you're aware as a parent, as a Sunday school teacher, right? And you can address these issues with them. Okay. All right, so as part of this Department of Church and Culture, about maybe 9 months ago when Sadhana started it, the first thing he asked me to figure out was, why are youth leaving the church? And sort of think about this topic, right? Because as some of you may know, and you're all old enough to know, a lot of your friends growing up aren't in the church anymore, right? So the people in the 40s and the 50s and the 30s, 40s, and 50s, the numbers are really bad. 65, 70% are gone. Right? And it's sort of this silent exodus that just keeps happening. And it's not like anyone declares, I mean, some people do, right? But a lot of people just, they come every other week, every third week, every fourth week, every Eid, every other Eid, right? And next thing you know, oh yeah, where is that guy? Yeah, I haven't seen him in 15, 20 years, right? And if we count the number of people in this boat, it's tremendous. So why is this happening? So to this end, we did a bunch of stuff to try to figure out the causes. And of course, this is something we're very concerned with as parents, right? This is not what we want for our kids. And so I want to kind of lay out some of the top 10 hits that sort of came out of this discussion and then talk through them together. Let me go through them very quickly and then I'll go through them in more detail. I have about 70 slides. That's too many. So I think I'm gonna get through 20 safely, and we'll just keep talking until you give me one of these, and then we'll be done. Wherever Claire is, she'll just tell me stop. There she is. Okay. So the first thing we see is disconnect between religious practices and a genuine relationship with Christ. Right? Kids talk about this all the time. Right? Church is a place of rituals. Church is a place of doing things. Church is a place of executing the right thing and the wrong thing to do. And then you ask them, what about your relationship with Christ? right? Or even worse, you say something like, how do you talk to Jesus, or anything like that, and someone will say, what am I, Protestant? And you're like, that's a harsh thing to hear, right? Because that's kind of what we're supposed to be doing here. So this disconnect becomes a problem, right? Because at some point, the mechanical rituals that are very satisfactory to somebody in possibly another culture, right? And I'm talking about the Arab Egyptian culture, may not be satisfactory to someone in the United States. They just may kind of say, you know what, I just go through the motions. Where's the relationship, right? And then you can see the Protestant church is very much about the relationship. And that's sort of all they talk about, is that personal relationship with Jesus. And it'd be nice to have a little bit of that, right? And that's why many of our youth, they go to a Protestant church and they immediately connect. And they're like, those people are talking to Jesus like he's their dad. And I want that. And all I do is go through rituals, and I've never had a prayer that sounded like that come out of my heart, like the way these kids talk. And that really affects them, and it should, right? They're not bad for having that thought, right? When they actually connect. Parental influence driving youth away from the church. This is you guys. Most kids leave the church because their parents did it, sorry. And ultimately what we're trying to do, one of the things is we're trying to bring back some of the experience of our elders and some of the mistakes we've all made, and then just tell them to people, right? And one of the projects we have coming down the road one of these days, God willing, is to bring people who have parented people like me in the United States and say, here's what I did wrong and here's what I did right, right? Because it's kind of criminal that we keep seeing the same mistakes being repeated over and over, and every generation sort of doing the same thing, and people come from Egypt and then they make the same mistakes and they say, oh man, I wish I hadn't done that. And we're like, yeah, we know, everybody who does that regrets it. And we're like, why didn't you tell them? Is the first question. Judgmental experiences and shame-based messaging in the church. And I want to point something out. A lot of times when kids say the church, they don't mean the church. They mean you. Right? And I'll tell you an experience I had once with this very thing. I was talking with a girl, she's about 27, and she's like a psychologist, and she, this stuff she studies, and she was talking about how the church was, and the church is so judgmental, and the church says this, and if I do this, the church says that. And I've known her a very long time, and we've talked quite a bit, and I was listening, and I go, this actually doesn't sound like the church, this sounds like your dad, because I know her dad. And she goes, oh my God, you're right. That's my dad. So every time she said church, she just replayed something her dad said. And she applied that to our Lord, God and Savior, Jesus Christ, and said, he's like this, right? And so what happens is, and this is not meant to scare you, but it should scare you, is you are the image of God to your kids. You are who God is, right? They are going to learn mercy. They're going to learn who God is from you. They're going to learn about his mercy from your mercy, his patience from your patience, his compassion from your compassion, right? So when I said it's on the parents, I didn't mean force them to come to a bunch of stuff at church. I meant you have to be that model of Christ. They have to see it in you, right? And I remember a dad who has 3 young kids once asked me, like, give me some advice on parenting. And the advice I gave him is, go to that story of the prodigal son, and every time your kid does something, think to yourself, what would the dad do in that story right now? And do that thing, right? And that's, the simplest way to be a dad. What would that dad do right now? How much mercy and love and forgiveness and compassion and tenderness would that dad show at this moment? Because you are the image of God to these kids, your kids. So they're going to learn about him from you. And they're going to get their mistaken identity, notions of who God is from you. Many people think God is hateful and revengeful. I heard this growing up all the time. I'd stub my toe, I'd hit my foot on something, I'd be, ow! My mom would say, you see, because you didn't listen to me, this is what God did to you. And I listened to her 2 weeks ago, right? So she still kept it, right? And I was like, is God like that? And I'm 9, and I'm like, is God punishing me? He's getting revenge on me. He's vengeful. You know, I mean, one of the youth who was struggling with her faith, she's trying to bring someone else into the faith, and this isn't premarital. And she said, you know, I got an internship. My mom said, if you don't come to church early, God's going to take it away from you. Right? And so she's like, you know, and I believe that. And I'm like, what kind of God is that? It's not nice. I wouldn't do that. And I'm not nearly as nice as God is. Right? So they're getting this impression, right? Because the parents are weaponizing God against their kids, right? I mean, she wants her kid to come, and you know, and then you just play it out, and you're like, well, how many times do you have to come to church early before God forgets, right? You know, is he forgetful God? Do you have to come before Abuna, before the gospel? I mean, what is this, right? The parent is just trying to go to church, go to church, go to church, right? But in the meanwhile, they're smearing the name of God in doing so. Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna get to 20 slides. Remember when I said 68 slides? Disillusionment regarding the treatment of women in church. Most of this is above our pay grade. But I will say, as much as we can do as parents, right? There's a lot of messaging we can do as parents, and to be careful here, especially with the girls, right? Keeping our girls from being treated as sexual objects is very important. And in Egypt, women are treated as sexual objects to be covered because they are just sex objects. And so you need to cover your sex objectness. And we have to make sure our girls don't get that message. And we have to, you know, make sure stuff like that. We'll talk about it. Absence of relatable mentors and examples of Christ in the lives of youth. I mean, honestly, if sometimes there's just one person at church who, when they see me, love me and hug me and want to hear about my week, that's all I need. I come for that one guy or for that one person. And so oftentimes not having that and just having this, which is our next one, is the shame-based messaging and the shame-based attacks is the issue. Superficial relationships within the church and emphasis on appearances. We all heard this. What are people going to say about us? Right? That's very damaging, right? Because that's not religion. That's social power, social influence, social whatever you want to call it. And when you apply that to God, now we have a real problem, because the first thing is, well, does God care what people think about me? Shouldn't I care about what God thinks about me? Is that really why I'm doing something? So if I'm worried about what people think about me, then the first thing I should do, if I have any brains, is hide from the people. And then I can do whatever I want, right, Mom? And there are some parents that say, yeah, I don't care what you do, as long as you're dressed as a deacon on Sunday, you can do whatever you want, right? And you give that kind of messaging, and now what is God? What is Christianity to this person? I'll take questions at the end. Inta Habibi, I know you. I let this guy go, it's gonna be 3 hours. I'm no dummy. Inta Amar, right? So, what was I say, right? So we have to avoid the emphasis on appearances and never let that come out of your mouth, right? It's about you and that relationship with Christ, not people. And, you know, and there's parents who say, don't post stuff on Instagram. Why? The people at church may see it. So I'm scared of the people at church, and I'm scaring my kids of the people at church. The people at church are not safe people. They are judgmental people. They are out to get you. Be afraid of the people at church. Now, quickly, let's all go to church and love them. I mean, and it's, you can see the disconnect here. Okay, and I will add one more thing here, sorry. This is why, in my opinion, many of the youth don't have, and I'm sure some of you experience this as youth, don't have very strong relationships within the church, right? So you'll see college kids who, you know, living in the dorm or living out, whatever, and their roommate or their friends at college know everything about them, but their friends at church don't, right? And they're not about to tell their friends at church anything, right? Because if I tell my friend at church that I screwed up, I did drugs, I slept with someone, he may go tell his mom. And if he tells his mom, mom tells Earth, right? So I'm not about to tell anybody Coptic, right? I gotta isolate the Coptic people. So I keep the relationships at church very shallow, right? We come to church, how are you? Good, good. How are you? Good, good. Nobody's good. Nobody's happy, right? But I'm not about to share that I'm having marital problems. I'm not about to share that, my kid just did drugs and I found out. I'm not about to share those things because this isn't a safe place. Because I've grown up to think, be afraid of the people at church. Perception of the church as homophobic and fostering unchristian hatred. Again, a lot of this comes from the parents. I had an experience with a friend. I grew up with her, and she told me, help me out. My son doesn't want to come to church anymore. And I said, okay, what's the deal? And she said, well, he's 25, and he doesn't like the position of the church on homosexuality. And this was 10 years ago. And I told her, oh, is he gay? And she said, no. And I said, maybe, does he have like a gay friend or something? She says, no. And I'm like, okay, I've actually never heard a talk at church on homosexuality, ever, in the Coptic church. I've never heard a lesson. This was 10 years ago, no one talked about it. And this guy is ready to leave the church because he's heard so much from us, apparently, on this topic. So I told her, I said, where did he hear all this stuff? And she goes, yeah, that would be me. And I go, okay. So every time you saw someone gay, you spouted out a bunch of hatred and vile language and just said, these people are disgusting and these people are blah, 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 blah. And it was so much that he's like, I don't want to be around you or your church that spouts this stuff. And so again, we have to be careful, right? Now, I concede 1,000%. The movement in the United States and Europe in particular is just crazy town, okay? And pushing apparently an agenda that's very, very strong and all of these things, right? But as parents, it's our knee-jerk reaction to compensate, okay? But you don't want to compensate. You want to stay down the middle and stay loving, and just down that middle ground. I'll tell you guys a story, since we're not going to get to any of the slides. My daughter, I think I told this story at the center too. My daughter came up to me, she was in 9th grade, and she said, Dad, that most of the girls in my class are lesbians. So we're just driving in the car. Immediately I grabbed the steering wheel a little tighter. And to my credit, I waited 10 seconds before I responded. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Like, what percentage do you think is a lesbian in your class? She was like 70%. Grabbed a little tighter. I said, oh, okay. Now, of course, I'm immediately tempted to say what? This is the world, this is wrong, Sodom and Gomorrah, these people are blah, 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 this isn't right, don't you listen to them, don't you become like them, are you gay, don't you dare, I'll kill you, right? This is all the things that came to mind, right? Just very, very quickly. Instead, the steering wheel felt the brunt of my anger, and I waited another 10 seconds, and I go, oh, well, that's interesting, because, the national average is like 5%. And she goes, oh, it is? And I go, yeah. And then I waited another 5 seconds, and I said, 70% seems a lot higher than 5. And she goes, yeah, it is. And I waited another 5 seconds. She's not good with math. And so I waited another 5 seconds. She's a cutie, though, with tea. And I said, well, it's interesting. Why do you think it's so much higher? She goes, I don't know. I waited 5 seconds. I go, I wonder if people get a lot of attention. Do people get a lot of attention when they say they're gay and come out? She goes, yeah, they do. And she started talking all about it and the clubs, and they post on Instagram and people have parties. And she shared with me all of these things, none of which I attacked her on because she's just the messenger, right? And I just listened. I go, wow, that's a lot of things. I said, do you think anybody would say they're gay just to get all that attention? Do you think a girl would do that? And she goes, yeah, I think they would. I bet you, because this girl, and she tells me about this girl who used to date a boy, and now she pretends to date a girl, but we all know she likes boys, blah, 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 right? And I listened, didn't attack her for anything she said, and I said, and then I ended it with, I feel really bad for these people who have to pretend to be gay just to get friends. That's really sad to me. Maybe they're missing something at home, or maybe there's something in their life. We should pray for them. And she was, yeah, we should pray for them. And that's how it ended, very calmly. Right? Now, if I had dug in and said, let me tell you about hell, and let me tell you where they're going, right? And I had really attacked, she would have defended gay people against me, and then hated me, hated the church, and hated God. That would have been the outcome of that encounter. right? But when you handle it calmly, right, and you don't try to compensate, you just go down the middle, right? So you just want to stay down the middle. That's how these interactions end better, right? So I'll just share that story. Okay. Need for the church, parents to address sexual issues and remove taboos. You need to talk to your kids about sex way sooner than you think you need to, okay? So, you're like, yeah, is 9th grade soon enough? Yeah, no, not even close, right? Take like 5 or 6 years off that. 3rd grade, start early. Start when they're little and talk to them about the level they can handle. And God willing, we'll have more seminars on how to have the talk with your kids. And these are some of the topics that one of these days we'll cover. And that's a whole ocean of stuff. But the point is, don't make it taboo. Don't, I'll tell you another story about my son. When he was in 8th grade, he said, "Hey, Dad, God isn't real." I took a deep breath and I said, "Okay, why?" And he goes, "Because I studied in evolution and they said that the world was created through evolution." So I took a deep breath. And if I had gotten defensive, right, then he knows he's got something, right? He knows he's got me, okay? No one gets defensive unless they're scared. So if I'd said, "No, that's wrong, and that's not why, and those guys don't know anything, and evolution is from the devil," he would say, "Yeah, okay, whatever, old man," right? But by engaging him in the conversation and talking about evolution, I'm saying, "Oh, you mean like Darwin, natural selection?" Absolutely, natural selection, of course that's what happens. Of course, the bird with the good beak lives, and the bird with the crappy beak dies because it can't eat bugs. No duh, right? So that, of course, happens all the time. And he goes, "Oh, yeah, you know about that." "Yeah, of course," right? And so by engaging in the conversation and not being defensive, once again, you kind of slowly erode away at this type of taboo, right? So this is just an example of any topic is okay with your kids, any topic ever. And I'll give you all a piece of advice. No matter what the kid says, no matter what they say, don't get angry. Don't yell at them for saying it, right? No matter what, right? Unless they set someone on fire, then you should get angry. Short of that, you always listen, you always stay very calm, and you always say, "Oh, okay, that's interesting," right? And you play along, right? I was talking with someone at the break about reverse psychology, and yeah, parenting is just reverse psychology. The whole thing from start to finish is, I'm angry, I'm fearful, I'm going to pretend like I'm calm and everything's great, and I'm going to engage in a conversation, right? Because ultimately, I don't really care about this conversation, right? This evolution conversation, we're going to have another 30 of these, unless I shut it down, right? Now, if I had come back at him and said, "You know what, we're going to talk to this biology teacher. I'm going to pull you out of biology right now. We're going to talk to the principal, and I'm going to read your books, and I'm going to tell you why this is wrong." "Oh, okay, no, never mind, Dad. Don't embarrass me. I don't want to be pulled out in front of all the kids. I don't want to be humiliated. I don't want you going down to the principal." "Yeah, okay, yeah, no, actually, I believe in God." And there it goes. We have a distance now, right? That topic is no longer approachable with you. So I'm going to cut you out of that topic, right? And you all know, right? You all have parents, right? There are topics you don't talk to your parents about, right? They ask you, "How are things?" And you say, "Fine." Are they fine? Of course not, right? But if you told your parents, they'd lose their mind. Okay, so, I've already instructed my kids, right? When Tita says, "How are you?" We are fine, right? If you're in the emergency room, you are fine. And that is always the right answer, right? Because if you don't, oh no, now we get 17 calls and 1,700 calls and lots of screaming, right? So she doesn't do well with that, right? So you all know your parents' triggers. Guess what? Your kids know yours, right? And so if there are certain topics that make the veins pop up in your neck, they know those topics and they will not talk to you about those topics, right? And they just cut you out slowly. And the list grows, by the way. They try it once, they get a bad reaction, maybe twice, and then you're done, right? It's like, don't talk to mom about that stuff. Mom doesn't do well, right? Maybe I'll try dad. Oh, dad is crazy too? Okay, moving on, right? Dad's crazier than mom. Okay, so, and then they have a laundry list of items, and the list grows over time, and after a while, when you're a teenager and all of a sudden you're asking your kid, "Hey, how come you never talk to me? Talk to me." They're just looking at you like, "Are you nuts?" I tried so much. When I was talking about this ministry, it was probably almost a year ago now, with Emba Serapion about it, he told me a story about a couple. And he said the couple was on the verge of divorce. And they had actually moved apart, the guy had moved out of the house, and they hid it from the parents. And he said, every time the parents would come over to visit, the guy would come back like half an hour early. He'd come in, they'd all pretend everything's great, right? And then they would leave, and then he would leave. And then next thing you know, they file for divorce. The parents have no idea what happened. They're totally blindsided. They had no idea anything was going badly. And the point he was making was, in American society, do you see how kids are taught not to tell their parents things? And I said, let me push back on that a little bit. Maybe that girl did try to talk to her mom many times over her 25 years of life. And maybe her mom didn't react well. And so she just knows, I'm going to shut this part out of my mom's life. Okay? And so you're now sitting on the parent side, and you have to be uber aware of these things, right? No matter what they say, you don't get angry. You don't shut it down. You don't blame them for saying it. You don't cite Sodom and Gomorrah. You don't talk about, well, that's how you go to hell, right? Just listen, no matter what it is. And then finally, the church viewed as a means to an end rather than embodying Christ's presence, which I think you got from the spirit of the other talks, the other points, which is, when you say just come to church, as long as you're there. And, let's make it more than that, right? Let's make it Christ's presence. This is where I meet my Savior. This is where I meet my dad. This is where I meet the person who loves me more than anyone else. This is where I go to recharge my batteries. All right, so the first one, disconnect between religious practices and a genuine... So how many of you speak Arabic? Okay, perfect. All right, so for those of you who don't, I'm sorry. This is an American church, but not that American. This is just a quote from Pope Shenouda, and he's talking about this disconnect between religious practices and a genuine relationship with Christ.
الناس ساعات بياخدوا الظواهر ويسيبوا الجوهر.
Zawahir is appearances.
يقول الحل إني أصوم، إني أصلي، إني أقرأ في الكتاب، إني أروح الكنيسة. كل ده كويس، لكن الحل الوحيد اللي من غيره كل الحاجات دي ملهاش قيمة إنك ترجع لله، تكون علاقة شخصية معاه، تكون محبة بينك وبينه. بدون هذه العلاقة، بدون هذه المحبة، لا فائدة من صلاتك.
ولا صومك ولا. Okay, so again, as a parent, if my relationship is prayer and fasting and the ritual, and I remove Christ from those practices, then I'm inserting a mechanical relationship, right? And that's dangerous. And if you tell me, look, I don't care about it, you just have to eat this kind of food during this period. Well, now, okay, I'll eat the food, right? And why? And why? Because, well, frankly, somebody could see you eat non-fasting food. And so when you go out with your friends, be sure to eat fasting food so they don't know you're not fasting. So what have I developed here? A superficial, shallow shell, right? That this kid, when he turns 22, is going to be like, this is dumb. I'm not doing this, right? This is ridiculous. And kids will say that. I was raised on ridiculous, okay? Now, of course, what Sayyidina is saying, he's not saying don't do those things, obviously, right? He's saying, but without the relationship with Christ, then the mechanical part is just mechanical, right? And we can't let ourselves just come down to that level and say, well, at least I'm doing it, right? We have to push them for more, and they have to see in us more. I'll tell you a story. This is probably bad parenting, but I'll tell it anyway. My kid, my oldest was 14 once. It was during Great Lent, and we're all fasting. And you know how we all get pissed off at fast sometimes. And so on a Saturday morning, he was in a bad mood. He wakes up, he starts throwing things. He's like, fasting sucks. There's nothing to eat. I hate this. This is stupid. Blah blah blah. Right? We've all done it. Our parents hit us, but that was different. So I just kind of looked at him and I was like, okay. So I took out 4 eggs out of the fridge. I scrambled them and I said, knock yourself out. And he's like kind of looking at me and I said, look, God doesn't need your fast. When you're ready to fast and fast from your heart and do it, then do it. But don't just do it and then hate it, right? And he's like, okay. And then of course, like 2 days later, he started fasting again, right? The moment was over. But if I had shoved it down his throat and say, this is what we do and this is how we do it, and if you break your fast, God, I was told in Sunday school once that if I fast 32 days and I break it on day 33, the 32 days don't count. Yeah. And then you're like, and I remember thinking as a kid, what kind of God is this? Who would do such a thing? Right? But that's the kind of way to incentivize kids to do things. Well, we're not just about doing things, right? So let them see you fasting, right? And you could even say, you know what, no, Habibi, don't fast. Dad's gonna fast, don't you fast. Eat whatever you want. And the kid would be like, no, Dad, I wanna fast. I wanna fast with you. Like, no, Habibi, eat meat. I'm gonna fast, you do whatever. And they're like, no, Dad, I insist on fasting. Reverse psychology, right? The more you say it, the less they do it. So you be the example, and then you just say, okay, whatever. Right? And this is something, we always, like in our house, we always practiced, right? I just say, I'm going to church, and I would just leave. And then the kids would call me, hey, why don't you wake me up? Why don't you take me with you? Why don't you go? I'm like, hey, you didn't wake up. Too late. No, you got to wake me up, please. No, if you don't wake up on time, then I'm not going to take you. All right, I'll wake up on time. Okay. All right? And I didn't hit anybody or force anybody or push anybody. It has to come from them. And Christianity is about freedom of will, right? That's what Christianity is. Right? We don't have this mechanical push on people's behavior. Behavior doesn't save. St. John Chrysostom talks about how if you impose morality, then it's not morality. Right, because you aren't doing it from your heart. You're just scared that the guy over there is going to hit you or do something or punish you if you don't do the right thing. That's not Christianity. It has to come from the heart. Now, of course, kids are different ages, right? So I don't suggest you do this with a 3-year-old, right? When the 3-year-old says, I don't want to go to church, they're going to church, right? And obviously, but when a 19-year-old says, or a 16-year-old says, I don't want to go to church, well, I got to think about that a little bit more, right? How I handle that. How I handle it at 3 is not how I handle it at 13 or at 23, right? Well, hopefully at 23 they're out of the house. Subtly. Okay. How much time do I have left, Clara? 20 minutes. All right. This is slide 3. I'm just gonna hit the arrow button. I think if I just hit the arrow button, we wouldn't get through the slides. Okay, so as parents, I'm not telling you to not do the things of the church, because what we have inherited from the church, from the living tradition of the church, is more than we understand, right? It's kind of like when you guys put your kids in schools, right? And you want to pick a high school, for example. What do you do to pick a private high school? How do you pick it? Go on the web, and what do you look for? Test scores, SAT, what college did the kids get into? What percentage got in the Ivy League, right? That's what I look for. I look for results. This school produces results. I like this school, okay? The church has produced results. Right? This is the living embodiment of tons of people who have tried millions of things, and this is what's come out of it, right? It's lived experience, right? This is what the holy tradition is. It's a lived experience that's continuous, okay? So what we have taken works, but what we have taken, we have to be careful that we take it with and give it with the same spirit we took it. And it's easier to take something and give it with a spirit that's what? My spirit, not God's spirit, okay? So I want you to even think about something as simple as liturgy. After liturgy, after every liturgy, what should we be thinking about as Christians? one of my favorite quotes is, the liturgy starts when we leave church. The liturgy starts when we leave church, right? My job as a Christian is I take Christ, I come and I take him, and then what do? Then I go be Christ. And what does that entail? Be the light of the world. I'm not called to just be light in this building, right? I'm not just called to be light of the church. Christ said, be light of the world. I'm supposed to go out and love people that kids will see me love. And so I'm supposed to take the same love that I just got and give it to other people, right? And I've come drunk from the fountain of life, the fountain of hope, and now it's my turn to be love and hope for everyone I meet, right? I received mercy, I should be giving mercy. I received justice, I should be giving justice. I received compassion, I should be giving compassion, right? This is what we're supposed to emphasize when we leave church. Every liturgy, we should emphasize, now go and be light, right? In fact, you know, in the Catholic Church, what do they call the liturgy there? Mass. It's kind of a weird name. Why do they call it Mass? It comes from this Latin ita missa, which means go, this is the dismissal, which is kind of a weird thing to say. It's called the dismissal. What's the point of that? Well, in their thinking, and it's actually a very beautiful spiritual contemplation, church is the place I go from. I come here to be dismissed into the world. I come, I receive, now go be dismissed. Okay? So this should be the emphasis, correct? Right? How many times have you heard these things growing up? I'm 53, I've heard it 8 times in my life. What have I heard instead? And again, it's about emphasis. Don't spit for 9 hours. Don't swim for 9 hours. Don't chew gum for 9 hours. Don't throw up for 9 hours. Don't walk barefoot in case you get a small cut. Don't brush your teeth for 9 hours. Don't cut your nails or hair for 9 hours. Right? And the list goes on. I mean, I just added nails and hair. I'd never heard of that one. Has anyone heard of that one before? I'd never heard of that one. I was out with friends on Wednesday, and that's the first time I heard. They're like, well, you're not supposed to cut your nails. I'm like, who said that? They're like, my mom. Okay. Add it to the list. So the list keeps growing. There's only 3 bullets there initially, right? And everyone's making stuff up, right? I don't know where the 9 hours came from, to be honest, okay? And half of those things, I mean, are biologically impossible, right? So we have to, so these are practices that people have done, and I believe they have a beautiful spiritual intent. I can see myself saying, you know, there's pieces of Christ in my mouth. Why would I spit? Beautiful meditation. That's great. Don't spit. Now, when you tell your kid, it's haram to spit, don't put your face in the water. Did you put your face? Go quickly, tell Abuna. What are we emphasizing? What religion is this? Right? Islam. Thank you. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? I think this includes questions, right, Claire? Okay. So I'll just stop solid 4 slides in, which is almost as far as I wanted to get. The other slides are so good. I have so many good videos. All right, I'll just take questions, and then that'll be the end of that. Yeah, Joy. Oh wait, let me do the mic thing.
The leaving of the church. Obviously, this isn't like you said before, people from our generation or even older have also left church. But is there any understanding or study, not that there needs to be numbers, but is there an understanding of like what age group this specifically pertains to, or if it's changed? Like when I was growing up, it was like kind of high school and then college. You're lucky if you saw people after college, right? I'm wondering if now with like times have changed and culture and social media and all that, I'm wondering if that age group has changed or has gotten like lower, if you know.
I don't. I feel like it's getting better. I feel like it's now after college. That's good. I think the 20s is the sort of the place where, again, it's just sort of a slow, I don't come as often. I was talking to one youth who is he's 24 or 25. He's at a huge church. And I said, I was talking about the youth group, and he goes, well, it's just me and this other guy that I know. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, we're the only 2 people my age that go to church. He's 25, and the church is a gigantic mega church. And I go, what? No one? I said, how many people were in youth group? He's like 40. And I go, 2 of you still go? And he goes, yeah. And I go, where are the rest? He goes, I don't know. No one. I don't know. So that number really scared me, right? Hearing that. And I get the feeling that's not an isolated incident. There are numbers like that. So, I mean, God help us. And of course, you know, there are ebbs and flows, right? I mean, this is a bad period, right? But then a lot of people in their 30s, they get married, they have a kid. Then they start, you know, if there's enough guilt, they start coming back. Maybe they'll baptize their kid, but not come to church. And then once the kid starts getting older and starts acting badly, then they start bringing them to church, right? To try to, so, I don't know. Sure.
I feel like, and again, it depends on the demographic of the church, and every church is unique, but I have seen and observed that, you know, I think like youth resources are obviously an issue or can contribute to that, but where there might be a lacking in that, or even if there's an abundance of that, I have seen and heard and have had other parents tell me, because I serve like a younger group of kids as well, that they don't have an interest. So they haven't had this exodus, it hasn't gotten to that point, but there is a vocalized disinterest in being in church as early as like middle school and younger. So I guess my question is, I don't necessarily want them to like wait until this exodus, you know what I mean?
No,
so I'm wondering if there's like, is there like preemptive measures, or like, is there something that addresses that, the kind of like signs where like, okay, not a big deal, they're little kids, they don't understand, they're bored, whatever, but I mean, it's not, because if you've met a kid,
No,
they're strong-willed and like they're vocalizing it from now. Like, and I said, as early as middle school or even like 4th grade or 5th grade, they just have no interest in being in church.
That's a great point. And actually, I read so the Catholic Church has done a lot with why youth are leaving. And this is not isolated to the Coptic Church by any stretch, right? All in the United States in general, all Protestant churches, Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, all of them are being, you know, the youth are leaving, and all these studies are why this is happening. In the Catholic Church, I read one of their studies, and they basically said that most youth that leave decide to leave in middle school. So in junior high, middle school, that's when they said, as soon as I'm 18, I'm out of here, right? And they make that decision, and then when they're 18 or in college, whatever, they make good on that, right? So a lot of youth will do things like, well, I'm going to go to a college really far away, church is too far away, and then they start with that. That slows down the relationship with church, and then next thing you know, it's off. And the key is you got to get them early, right? Which is why, you know, things like this and sort of nipping this in the bud. I was just telling, you know, some of the other, it's good to have talks like this, you know, before people have kids, right? Because usually the way it works is people have kids, the kids become teenagers, and then the kids are like, hate them, right? And then they're like, hey, what do I do now to restore this relationship with my kid? And it's like, that was, you know, 11 years ago is when we should have had this discussion. Yes. Oh.
This is just a petition to hear more of your slides.
No. One of these days, God willing, I don't know. We have a schedule to keep. And actually, the next speakers are better, so I will fight your petition. Whoever. All right, just keep it to 17 minutes, Rami, okay? Just nice and short.
I was instructed to be good. You're right about the misogyny that we inherited from, well, the folks we took in who have subsequently we have become our hosts. However, there's also a huge bit of confusion about what being a masculine man in the Orthodox Christian tradition looks like in the Coptic Church. Partially because every brave Coptic person was probably martyred sometime in the last 1,300 years. So you're right about the homophobia, and you're right about the misogynistic overtones of the church that drive the youth away. But have you maybe also thought that Coptic men have no idea how to reconcile masculinity from the sort of the extremes of massive misogynism from Near Eastern Muslim culture versus hedonistic Western culture?
I appreciate the brevity of your question. And I know all of you are thinking it wasn't brief, but it was. This is he's just fun. I've known him for 40 years, too many years, 40 years now. Absolutely right. And in fact, every once in a while, I'll be at a Coptic club and I will tell just kind of straight up that I'll tell the boys, I say, many of you guys grew up seeing, forgive me, a father who was not acting as a Christian, he was acting as an Arab, right? And he was like, yelling when the food wasn't ready, and he doesn't do anything in the house, and he hits people, and this isn't Christian fatherhood, right? Which is why we often see now young girls or, 20-somethings, a lot of them in the marriage ceremony will say, I don't want to hear submit to your husband. And the reason they recoil against the word submit, any overtone of a submit, is because when they hear submit to your husband, they think about what their mom did with their dad. And they don't want to ever do that again, right? So they saw their mom abused, and then when they asked their mom, hey mom, why are you putting up with this? Mom said, well, Habib, you have to submit, right? And so they're like, yeah, well, I'm not doing that, right? And so you have a lot of guys who are like, hey, I know what being a man looks like. The bravado and some of the Arab culture, that's frankly Islamic, right? I mean, women are very subjugated. I have a lot of good slides about that in here, by the way. Actually, it's interesting. Like if you look at Pharaonic times, the woman is revered. So as Coptics, Egyptians, we're not like this, but fair point. Makar. Oh, sorry. And then my cousin.
Thanks, Archie. I wanted to just emphasize or acknowledge a point that you made kind of quickly. When you were giving the example of one of your kids asking about evolution, you were just quickly saying that, and so I asked him, Darwinism and natural selection. And that shows that you have some information already. You know something about this topic. So when your kid says something to you, you could recall information that you're already prepared with. And I think that's one of the things that's a little hard for us as parents, is that there's like 20 to 50 topics. We need to be able to say, 10 points each about each of them. And so it can't be that when my child comes up to me and says something, it's the first time I've thought about it. Right? And most of these topics, we already have lists of them. And so I think part of it too is there's, I'll say it simply, is that's one of the big inconveniences of parenting, is that you have a child and now all of a sudden you have to study on 50 topics. But it is the thing. And if you're not prepared, what you can access, which is wrong, is you're gonna access this anger. You're gonna be like, why is my kid mentioning all these things? I don't have time to read. I don't have time to listen to lectures. Why are they bringing up these topics? And you're gonna get annoyed with your kid. So, but the kids just trying to do life. They just heard something and they felt comfortable to bring it up to you. So the summary of what I'm trying to say is we need to, instead of kind of being anxious about the topics coming up, we need to take action and prepare and learn. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. And I'll add that sometimes our reaction, like if he says, I don't believe in God, right? I could have said, how dare you, don't ever say that again, blah, 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 right? And I could have attacked him for that concept, right? Instead, I just asked him why, right? And let's probe a little bit. So there is a tendency that if I don't know the answer, the right thing to do is to get mad. Right? And then if I get mad, I shut down the question, right? And we've all experienced this, like, with parents in Sunday school, right? When they get angry, they just don't know the answer. Don't do that. Just say, I don't know anything about that. Let's read about it together. right? That's a much better answer. But your approach is the best, which is you got to learn before, right? And you got to get in there and figure out what's going on in the world. Yeah, so let me address two pieces of that. The first part of it is when you say there's a selfish part of me that, and I'll use a different word, has to die, like the grain of wheat, in order for me to follow Christ. That is absolutely true, and that is the work of the Christian, right? Jesus' command to us was, deny yourself, carry your cross, and follow me. This is the work of the Christian, right? And so if that's the thing that's stopping the person, well, then we have to address that, right? There's an ego there, there's a selfishness there, but what you don't want to do is you don't want to attribute broadly every time someone says, well, I'm not getting anything out of this. You don't want to too quickly attribute that to, well, that's because you're a selfish pig, right? That's because you don't want to put in the work. That's because you think it's all about taking when it's all about giving, right? Because now what you've done is you've told your kid's trying to tell you something. He's trying to have a relationship with you. And what you're saying is, well, you're bad. And that's why you said that. And so now the kid's going to be like, right? So you have to be careful you're not shutting it down or too broadly just painting with a broad brush. Well, you know what's wrong with kids these days, right? Because, the Gospels tell us we love him because he loved us first, right? And that's the relationship. So if I don't feel loved first, and then you tell me now love, I don't know about that, right? And if the only thing I've ever experienced is you have to go, you better do this, you blah, 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 because God is good and you are, I'm not getting anything out of this relationship, right? Because it is a relationship, okay? So hopefully the kids, well, that's one of yours, hopefully the kids, not mine, I hope, hopefully the kids are feeling that love of God from you such that, Father Matthew the Poor, when he talks about martyrdom, he says, the reason we celebrate the martyrs isn't because they died for Christ. It's because they had already died for Christ to the point where if someone asks them to give their life, they say, absolutely, right? So and the reason they had died and given so much is because they have gotten so much. Right? I would do anything for my Lord. And you just go back to the story of the sinful woman, the woman caught in adultery. What did Christ do? He said, go sin no more, but that's not what he started with, right? He started with, I'm going to make these bad guys throwing rocks go away, and I'm going to look at you compassionately and lovingly, and then I'm going to tell you, I don't judge you either, and then I'm going to save your life, all right? So what did he gave her first. Right? And after he did all those things, can you imagine saving your life, not feeling judged, making the people with the rocks go away? She's looking up at him and going like, I would do anything for this guy. I would do anything for this guy, right? And that's when he said, go and sin no more. Again, not because that's bad, but because I love you and don't do that to yourself. You're better than that. You're worth more than that, right? So we have to make sure that that direction is always maintained, right? So we love, and then the kids, out of the kindness of their heart, you see kids who are servants, right, just doing all kinds of crazy things. Their kids drove down here from the valley this morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. Why? Because they've taken and they're ready to give, right? That has to be the direction. Yes. Oh, wait till, sorry. Okay, no, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry. This is something you mentioned early on, like 2 slides ago. You mentioned how we don't want to emphasize, don't do this, don't post this on Instagram because of the judgment that comes from people in church. My question more is, how do we prepare our children for the judgments that will come? Because we know that there's people who judge. We know that there's people who have that mindset. Maybe it's not us telling them that this will happen, but how do we prepare them to handle that judgment from anyone that comes, whether it's from people in church or people outside church?
I understand the question. The question is, you want to protect your kids, right? And all of us have been hurt by people whoever they are, who have come after us, smeared us, said stuff about us, and it stings, and you would do anything to protect your kid from that situation. Okay, so that's good, right? But part of it is these things happen, right? So I think a lot of what we do is we try to be preventative, okay? And sometimes it's okay to let something happen and then foster the relationship through it, right? So I guess what I'm saying is you're so scared that your kid's gonna get talked about, okay? That your motivation is fear. You're afraid for your kid and you're afraid from the people. And my contention is fear is a horrible motivation for anything. Fear makes bad decisions, right? So when you're afraid or anxious or whatever, the things you're gonna say aren't good things, right? It's not gonna come from the right place. So in your desire to prevent harm, you're gonna create more harm, right? Because what you're gonna really possibly do is turn your kids on the people at church, right? We're in this family, we're good, but those people out there are bad, and we're safe here, and those people aren't, right? And then you could be causing more damage than good, right? So what I would suggest is you can offer them a wisdom, but make sure you yourself are over your own traumatic issues, right? And make sure you yourself are past your own hurts. Okay, I mean, I'm not pointing you out. I mean, we all have them, right? I mean, I don't even, although I think we know each other. Yeah, from a long time ago. Okay, you need to catch up. As I saw you, I'm like, hey, I know that guy. So once I'm in that good place, right, where I can look and say, look, people talk. This happens, right? Learn to let it go. Learn to be wiser, right? I don't have to tell everybody everything. Kids get burned. That's okay. They get burned, right? Now, but I'm there to help them work their way through it, right? Because remember, as a parent, my job is to create independent kids. That's the bogey, right? That's what I'm trying to do, okay? I don't want a 42-year-old boy who says, hey, Dad, what pants should I wear today? Like, what? I failed, okay? As a parent, if they're still asking. So I'm always pushing independence, right? Even when they start walking, right? I'm holding their hand, and then after a while, I want to let go of their hand, right? Because they need to learn to walk on their own. If I'm always just got both hands, and there's always that one parent that's always, and the kid never walks, right? So you want them to be independent. You want to push that wisely, right? So let them experience, right? And then, within measure, within confines, within bands of danger, okay? And then be there for them as part of the relationship. Does that make sense? I don't know if that was good advice or not, but how much time do I have, Claire? We can do one more. Okay, I will not pick. Thomas is going to pick, and then I'm just going to look up.
I know the Q&A is really helpful, so I'd rather scratch some of the activities and do more Q&A.
You tell me. أنا تحت أمرك. This is a communal. All right, let's take 2 more questions. Yeah.
FYI, it's also called the.
Yeah, is there another mic?
I was saying it's also called Mass in Australia and Coptic Church, which is good. You tackled the parenting. Just want to tackle a little bit on peer pressure. Talking junior high, high school, freshman. When you have friends, and I think statistically showing that you're usually the average of the group that you're in. So if your child is in a group that is doing well, you're going to be doing well. So if it happens, my daughter's in a group, friends from church, the same as at school, the same group. And then if you're not happy with the group she's in, and unfortunately this is the group that happened to be her age in Sunday school, and you want to kind of deviate away or move her away from that group into some with other people. How would you try not to pick on the negative or the negativity they're doing, and kind of make her pick or go with a group that's doing well in some other areas, especially church and school, to be smarter, better, without having to say all the negative things about that group, or because they're doing this, and like, you're not putting a short in church because they're not doing, or they're not following. Even if the mom's following, the parents are doing, like, things are okay. How can you kind of, you do mostly a lot of things you said we're trying to do, but then the peer pressure has a lot of the.
So there's no doubt that your kid's social circle is going to influence your kids, right? And but I will add something to that statistic, right? So if you have a social circle, okay, there's a correlation. It's not always causality, right? Because the kid picked the social circle, right? And they're kind of attracted to the kids in that social. First, they have common things, right? That's why they're friends, okay? So it isn't so much that the social circle made my kid bad. It's maybe, I mean, sometimes it does happen for sure, right? But sometimes it's my kid likes these kids for these reasons, okay? Which means the problem isn't the social circle, the problem is your kid, okay? So another way to think about it, right, is I think, okay, the first thing is, it depends on a lot of things, right? But the first thing it really depends on is your relationship with your daughter, okay? And you have to be very careful how much relationship you have to burn, right? How much relationship capital you have to burn. And some parents don't put enough into the relationship and early on. And then when they become teenagers, they say, all right, now let me tell you what you're going to do and do and do. And they're just kind of look at you like, well, you never spent time with me, and you never talked to me, and now you're going to tell me how to live my life? No, thank you, right? Now you've got the worst possible reaction, okay? So you have to be very wise. And again, similar to his question, there's a fear there, right? You're afraid these kids are going to make my kid bad, okay? And fear doesn't make good decisions, right? And so as soon as you're entering it with that perspective, you may take a tone, you may take a stance that's a little bit too much and past the relationship that you've built. And kind of when you cross it a little bit too much, they push back, and sometimes they'll push back hard and say, well, they're my friends and you don't know anything about them, and you're judging them, and you think those people are good at church, but they're not, and you don't know anything. And now you just burned your shot, okay? I mean, not totally, okay? But if that happens, right, now you've got to go back to build relationship, right? Boba, coffee, hang out, right? Invest. And I would say as a parent, and I mean, again, this is a personal style, right? But I would focus on the investing and very rarely pull the what should I do card, right? Or tell them what to do. They're gonna see it from you, okay? And so what I went from the very early point of like people self-select into social groups, if you're constantly feeding them the good things, not feeding them by telling them, feeding them by them seeing you, they're going to naturally gravitate towards groups that are like that, right? I mean, if you're constantly being honest and loving and caring towards others, and they see you running to people's aid, and they see you praising people, and then they hang out with a social group where everyone's gossiping and cussing and hurting others, they're going to be like, yeah, I don't like these guys, right? Why? Because my mom and dad don't act like this. Not my mom and dad don't say these things, they don't act like this. I see my dad and my mom running to friends' houses and people coming over who need help all the time, right? I don't like this group. Now it's natural. It's not as fast as the reaction you want, which is you should go with them because they wear a sharpie, right? But, not to make fun of that, but I couldn't let it go. So build from the inside, right? And, you know, like, I'll tell you, this is my own personal approach, and everyone has a different one. My kids ask me anything, almost anything. First word out of my mouth is sure. That's like the first word I said, sure. And then I started asking, hey, can I go? Sure. And I go, and then I'll ask, like, oh, this guy, isn't that the guy that smokes weed? And they're like, yeah, that's him. Like, oh. Okay. Sure, you can go. I mean, but is he gonna smoke weed? Maybe. Hopefully the cops don't show up, huh? Yeah, that'd be bad, right? And have a conversation instead of the hard no, right? Because when you say sure to begin with, it brings down the fight, right? Now, because this is a fight or flight situation, and if once I say sure, okay, now I'm listening again. But if it's like no is the first word, not so good. So focus on the relationship with her. She seeing you is going to be far more effective. Right? St. John Chrysostom says, nobody can hurt your family if you don't let them, right? You're the main thing. And even though you don't think you are. Because the kids have a camera on 24 hours a day, right? They're watching you constantly. They have absorbed more from you than you can imagine, right? And that's why as we get older, right, all of a sudden we'll do something when we're teenagers and go, oh my God, that's my dad. And you're pissed, right? Because I don't want to be like my dad. But you are. Right? Why? Because the camera's been on and you've been watching. So they're watching, right? And you be the right person and they'll get there slowly. Ah, yes, Nina. Also known as Manuna. No, actually it's not. I just gave him a nickname. I like it. It'll stick.
I never heard Manuna before, but I'll take it. All right, what's your take on I'm finding myself doing this. Very subtle. No, both of us. Very subtle overcompensation of like what we know what's happening in the world and what we don't want our daughter to start. Accepting, doing, learning. It's like, for instance, my daughter says, oh, only girls wear dresses, right, Dad? I'm like, yeah, girls only wear dresses. Or, can Daddy wear earrings too? Oh, only Dad wears the earring. Only Mom wears the earring, sorry. Are we, in a way, not showing that kind of acceptance or that love? Are we fending for our child at this early age? Or are we giving her some closed-mindedness or what have you?
So this is a tough one, right? Because, so first of all, as the parent, you're the ultimate source of their knowledge of what's right, okay? So you have to be that source. So I don't ever suggest you say something false because that's what the world wants, okay? No, he doesn't want to go. Having said that, you have to realize now in an American society, right, tolerance and acceptance has been preached from infancy, okay? So you have to be careful that you don't strike against that so much because they're gonna have a very bad reaction. And you can blame whatever you want, the media, the schools, whatever, right? But it's actually a good thing, right? Which is they've been taught tolerance and non-judgmental. They have blue hair, they have orange hair, they're married to a cow, whatever, it's all good, okay? And they've been pushed that, right? So if you have too much of not that, they're gonna, especially if they get older, they're gonna start to push back against it, right? So depending on the age, okay, I mean, your daughter's young, but like, depending on the age, you word things carefully, right? Like, do boys wear earrings? And you can say, well, does Daddy wear earrings? Right? And then like, no, like, yeah, most guys, some guys do, but I don't. And if she respects you, then it'll work, right? If you've got that relationship with her and you put in the boba time and the coffee time and the fun time, it's enough to say, well, you see that the mom wears dresses and Dad wears pants or whatever, right?
She almost.
Yeah, it's on.
She almost there.
Oh. I don't know. No, it's off.
She sees that we're in and out. Oh, Dad, he has earrings on. That's not right, right? She didn't hear it, but I have. It can get really tricky.
You have to buy everyone a burger.
Oh yeah. But it's a Christian establishment, so.
Well, I'll add one more layer to this, which is, and this kind of goes back to the Ashar point, right? Sometimes Not that there's anything wrong with sharp. No, sometimes and I'm not suggesting boys wear earrings, right? But sometimes our reaction to certain things is very, very strong relative to what it is. Okay, and your kids, especially in this culture, will react to that, right? You're like, are you judging him because he's wearing? Well, we all know judging, right, is the bad thing that Jesus talked about many times. Okay. And the earring thing is a cultural thing that kind of comes in and out. Roman soldiers wore earrings, and it kind of goes in and out, and it's a trend thing, right? So, where I dig in, is when I see, like someone being unmerciful, right? And I'll say, that's wrong. And I just come right out, and I say, that's not the right way to handle that. And I dig into that, right? Or someone's not being compassionate or loving, okay, or peaceful or patient. I don't dig in on someone's wearing an earring. See, that's bad. Don't, that's kind of this, false, this red herring that we can jump on that I don't think is the real fundamentals of the gospel, right? And I think the truth of the gospel and the truth of Christ bears out, right? People feel what patience and mercy feels like, right? And they know that's right. Whether or not this and this and look at that dress, it's too short. Can you believe she's wearing such a short thing? Oh my gosh, blah, blah. That's not the big things. So focus on the big things. And that's where you dig in. I dig in at least. Yes. Okay. Sam. Okay. Sorry. Should this be our last question, Clara? Yes, this will be our last question.
I'm not going to ask a question. I'm going to just say 2 quick comments.
Okay.
So for his last question, I have 3 boys.
Menuna.
And they asked the same Menuna.
It's going to stick.
We have 3 boys and they ask the same question. So I usually tell them what we prefer. I try to explain that there's certain things that are right and wrong, and then there's things that are different in each culture. So I tell them, in our culture, boys don't wear earrings, Baba doesn't wear earring, Ginto doesn't wear earring, but then other people will wear that. But that's not what we prefer. And I know, and try to explain,
I don't know.
he knows the history of the earrings, so he tells them the history, how it started, and so on. So that's the way that we do it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment also on the church thing, why people do church. And I came to the U.S. 20 years ago, and I saw it like when I came. Like I just finished high school when I came, and I could tell, I could see what's happening. And in the church that I was going to at that time, there's a lot of judgment, not just from the people, from the street. And it felt like the people that are serving and the people that are like the leaders in the church, they're the example of the angels or the saints, and it felt like they're not accepting anyone else. If you're smoking hookah, you can't come to serve for us because you're not part of the chosen. And that in the church that I attended pushed almost all the high school kids and all the college kids disappeared from us. And I feel like it's not selfishness when we come to church because we are taken from the church, but that's the social thing. That's why we're coming to church. I am coming to seek from God. I am coming to get love from the priests and from the servants and to be able to give it outside. And if we're not giving that to our kids in high school and college, and we see it from early on, if the priests are serving everyone, or the servants are serving everyone for their mistakes, then it's hard to keep our kids in the church.
Yeah. So let me address that. The first thing is I want to point out that no archdeacon's judged, right? Which is, just saying. She didn't mention it. Okay. The next thing I'll say is it's important for you as parents, all of you, to make sure the kids recognize that they're all just people. And the way they recognize you recognize that they're all people is in your own discussion with them, giving them grace, and when they see you give them grace, and not overly, I think some parents caused the problem because when the kid was growing up, they're like, whatever Abuna says, do as Abuna says, blah, 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 right? And this kind of worship thing, right? And then, so then in the kid's mind, the guy in black is a god, right? And then once I see the guy in black or the servant or whomever not be God and be a human being, it all falls apart. And everyone's like, I'm not even coming back to this place because I had such high, So I think it's important from early on just to kind of keep everybody human, okay? And then when they see you have grace with these situations, right, they'll start to have more grace as long as, and as parents, right, the most thing we can control is us, right? And it's very easy to get very frustrated very quickly with the clergy and the servants and the deacons, and not the archdeacon, but everyone else, the other deacons, and feel like, they're gonna ruin my kid, okay? And again, this comes back to fear, right? That guy is gonna ruin my kid, and now I'm scared, okay? So my reaction when my son says something, he's like, well, don't you listen to him, right? Or, there's too much of it. So you can protect your own child by you not being that way, right? And I've said to my kid many times on many occasions, things I don't want to say on this microphone, but I'll say, look, I don't even care if you do blah, blah, blah. That's fine with me. That doesn't bother me, right? Oh, but this person said, again, not with disparaging that person, but just say, look, that doesn't bother me. So, and I'm not going to, and they'll feel no judgment from me, because again, they're learning about God from me, right? So even if this person is saying this thing, they're learning about God from me. I'm the primary source. And if I haven't made somebody else God, then, well, let's read what the gospel says. Let's see what Jesus said. And that helps that situation. But you're right. I mean, it's cancer. It's all over the churches, and it's very harmful. I mean, the number of youth who have left is just, and they all have the same story. Yes, Todd. I'm sure it will be.
I grew up and raised in Egyptian Catholic Church. My first time to be involved in the Coptic community is here. Yeah, so I get the shock.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, I was too close to withdraw from the church. It's just I'm coming to attend the liturgy, and it's shock for me. It's just like, it's different. I'm not judging anyone or something, but it was different. It's just that I want to try to compare. It's not compare. I'm always like, we have this fight, and I'm always compare and discussion. And
this is a safe place, Habibi.
Yeah. Like in the Catholic Egyptian church, we felt like it's home. And to be honest with you, we just like grow up, we have this safe space to ask, to do every mistake without even think about like someone can judge us or something. Like Abuna is like, he knows what we do. He knows we go like to the side street to smoke cigarette, and he knows that. And we come and pay for our ahwa. Sometimes like that, we do that ahwa extra church. We never get the lecture of like, oh, you have to go to pray. We are going to church to pray with no one else to pray. Like sometimes the church is empty, you can find like 18 years old by himself in the like at the cave with the Virgin Mary, like just sit and pray for no one. It's just like it was so cozy, so welcoming. It felt like home, and it felt like safe. So this is you here in like the Coptic culture or like the Coptic church. I felt like, yeah, I'm not there. I'm not wrong. To be honest with you, I don't know how we can change this, because if I'm sitting here like 26 years old and with all this experience and I felt disconnected, I'm sure the young people in the youth they felt safe.
That story makes me very sad.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'll be okay. I'm a big boy. So it's a very sad story. It's a very common story. And it's a very frustrating story, because anything you can't control that controls you is frustrating. And so the only thing I would suggest is control what you can control. And the only person you can control is you. So my approach to solving the problem of judgmental people at church is to not be judgmental. And my approach to not having a home for people now is when I see somebody, I give them a hug and I say, what's your name? And welcome. And if I can, there's a story about, I'll tell you a different story. Mother Teresa, when she won the Nobel Prize, Catholic, they basically told, some people were criticizing, they say, there's still a lot of poverty in Calcutta. She didn't really make a dent in the problem, right? And her response was, if you can't feed 1,000 people, you feed one, right? And so my calling as a Christian isn't the church. My calling is the human being right in front of me. And that's the only person I can affect in this moment, right? And if I can be that person to someone at church, if each of us, 50 people here, each of us said, I'm going to be that loving person to someone at church, the church would transform in a year because the person you loved would then become loving to someone else. And it would be like fire. So the only advice I can give you that to keep you from being frustrated is be that person you want to be. That person, be it, do it, right? And a lot of times at church, we come to church and say, well, how can I serve? What can I do? How about you just be? How about you just be a Christian, right? Go out, be a Christian at work, be a Christian with your family, be a Christian with people around you, ask about them, love them, show them the same compassion Christ did. And then if an eighth of us did that, the church would change very quickly because I don't need 100 people to love me at church. I just need that one guy, right? When I come, uncle gives me a hug and he puts his arm around me and goes, hey, tell me about school. And he really cares and I can see it in his eyes that he cares. That's all I need. I come for one uncle, right? Or one tant who actually loves me. I don't need 100 people to love me at church, right? And that would be enough. If you had one person who was really just loved you, that would be enough, right? So be that person. That's all I can advise. Nothing else works. Yes, آخر سؤال.
It's not a question, more like a comment, actually.
Okay.
I truly appreciate the way that this is going through right now, changing our culture. Removing the Islam from what we learn, right? But one of the things you mentioned, one of the points is actually learning about God's love. And I feel this is lacking hugely in our church, especially from Sunday school, for example. My daughter goes to Sunday school. When I ask her what did you do on week-to-week basis, she's like, oh yeah, we learned about the saint, we colored, and we went home. Okay, great. I would love to be like the saint, but I don't know how to get there. Yet alone, when I put myself into her shoes when I was a kid, going to Sunday school, doing the same exact thing, I learned about Saint George, and he got martyred, and I was afraid to death of actually doing that, right? So I don't know, how can we really learn? Also, I hope one of the 300 slides that you have has how to love God and how to approach us, how we approach God, and as well as to the kids. And maybe change the curriculum a little bit from Sunday school to actually address that, because this is going to be as a result. They're going to be like St. George. They are going to be like St. Marina. They are going to be like these saints only if they love God, not the other way around.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. And this is why the very first slide of the talk was, the one I did get to, was Sunday school does not raise your kids. So they're going to learn the love of God from you, not from what you said, right? But from how you are. And that's what they're going to learn.
And I totally agree with that. But sometimes because we were stained by the way that we were brought up, either from Egypt or here. And I thank you for actually changing this culture a little bit to tell us what we're doing wrong. And you're doing it absolutely right by telling us we're doing wrong, and eventually what we do right. But I think also it needs to be sustained by the Sunday school, not just by
that would be the goal down the road. the thing I would say is all of us are stained somehow. And, you know, from a variety of things, whether it be the culture, our parents, Sunday, you know, whatever. And so the order that you said is right, which is I do me first, right? In an airplane, it says, you know, if the cabin pressure drops, these masks fall. And what do they always tell you? Put your own mask on first, right? Because if you pass out, you're no good to that kid, okay? So even if the kid passes out, you put on the mask, he's gonna come back, okay? So you have to put your own mask on first, which means I focus on my life with God first. That's the battle. That's the real battle, you know? And I can't tell you how many people you hear, you know, they'll say, well, you know, who's your confession father? You ask someone who's 30, 40, 50, and they'll be like, well, I don't confess anymore. You know, I'm 50 now. What? Like, what did you just say? I mean, think about that. And so, you know, it's something to say, well, I'm kind of past that now, right? And so we don't have a culture of adult Christian, you know, it's like, I just go for the kids. I just throw them in Sunday school. Well, what about the Bible study that Abuna's doing at the same time? No one's in the Bible study. I mean, we have an adult meeting here while the kids are in Sunday school. 1/3 of the people are here, the rest are having coffee, right? And so what about your spiritual walk? What about your spiritual life? And the church can't, that's you. That's you and you digging deep and fighting that battle. And believe me, when you dig deep and you fight that battle, the kids will see it and they will absorb it. One of the many slides I have here, let me just, yeah, عشان خاطري بس. Yeah. Huh? I'm not giving you the deck. There's no way. I'm kidding. All right. So I know this is the pharaonic thing I was telling you about. It's so good. Okay. All right. Let me end with a few quotes, please. Pray, and when you have to, speak to your children with love. He's saying, talk less, lots of prayer and few words. Lots of prayer and few words for everyone. We mustn't become an annoyance, but rather pray secretly and then speak. And God will let us know in our hearts whether the others have accepted what we have said. Because if we speak, we become an annoyance, and others may react or even infuriate them. This is why it is better to speak mystically to the heart of others through secret prayers rather than to their ears. Right? So again, this starts with you, and that's not the one I wanted to show you. This one look good? No, it's kind of... okay. The life of children seems to be affected by the radiation of their parents. If the parents insist, come on now, go make confession, go receive communion, and so on, nothing is achieved. But what does your child see in you? How do you live, and what do you radiate? Does Christ radiate in you? That is what is transmitted to your child. This is a saint. This is where the secret lies, and if this is done when the child is young, it will not be necessary for it to undergo great travail, like lots of. All right. Last thing. So good. Yeah, I know. Okay. All right. Okay, fine. And there's even more. No. Okay, that's not important. Okay, I think those are good. If a man takes care of his own business and turns to God in prayer only when misfortune comes upon him, which are beyond his power, then he begins to hope in God. Such a hope is vain and false. A true hope seeks only the kingdom of God. The heart can have no peace until it obtains such a hope. So here it's don't pray only when the kid's in trouble, right? And then like, God, fix it, right? The prayer should be a relationship with Christ that starts whether or not I have kids, right? And they feel that, and that's what they react to, and that's what raises them. And glory be to God forever. Amen. Thank you guys. And now Clara's going to tell us about the schedule.